Hey, what's up guys? It's Pedro here from noobcoder.com, and in this tutorial we're going to be talking about creating our deconstructor for our linked list. So to get started, we have our linked list here. Our header is pointing to the first node, tail is pointing to the last node, and we have our data member size of 4. Now our deconstructor is going to get invoked whenever our linked list goes out of scope. And the whole point of a deconstructor is to do memory cleanup. So what we're going to do is actually delete every single node within our linked list. So to get started, we're going to have to start at whatever header is pointing at. So we just can't say header delete the first node. So let's take a look at that situation. And the reason for that is if I just delete the node that header is pointing to, then we lose the pointer to all the other nodes within our linked list. So we're going to have to create a temporary pointer. Now I called this pointer next because next is going to be always pointing to the next node that we're going to delete. Now we usually, when we traverse a linked list, we have 2 pointers. But for this case, since this is a deconstructor, I don't care what header is pointing to at the end of this. And I also don't care what tails is pointing to at the end of this either. So we could take advantage of that, and I could just use header since header is already pointing to the first node. So now I have my header that points to the first node, and I have next declared. So now we're going to have to traverse the list by running a loop. Alright, so now that we're in the loop, the first step, next, points to whatever header arrow next is pointing to. Then delete whatever is at header. Advance header to what next is pointing to. Alright, execute the loop again. Next is going to point to header arrow next. Delete the node header is pointing to. Advance header to what next is pointing to. Execute the loop again. Next is going to point to what header arrow next is pointing to. Delete what header is pointing to. Make the header point to next. And then execute this one more time. Next is going to point to what header arrow next is, which is just going to be null. So I'm just going to leave this out here. And then delete what header is pointing to. Make the header point to next. So now header and next are both null. And then that's the end of the loop. So now let's actually take a look at this in code. Alright, so here we have our deconstructor. Now the first step, we're going to have to declare a pointer that's going to point to the next node. I'm just going to say node star next, and we're just going to declare it. The second step, we're going to have to traverse the list. So I'm just going to use a while loop, and we're going to test to see whether or not header does not equal to null. So while header does not equal to null, keep executing this loop. So the first step, get the next node that's in front of header. So I'm just going to say next is going to be pointing to header arrow next. The second step, delete the node that header is pointing to. And finally, we need to advance header and make it point to next. So that's pretty much our deconstructor for our linked list. We have a temporary pointer that points to the next node within the list. We want to keep going until we hit the end of the list. Next is always going to refer to the next node in line. We delete what header is pointing to, and then header needs to be advanced to what next is pointing to.